If you had the chance to ask a single question to one of the most powerful men in America, what would it be? A 10-year-old black boy sat in the front row of a grand conference hall. His small hands clutched the edges of his seat, his wide eyes fixed on the man standing under the bright spotlight on stage. Hundreds of people surrounded him. Business executives, political supporters, skeptics, each listening intently to the powerful voice echoing through the hall. But when the time came for the audience to ask their questions, it was the boy's soft voice that silenced the entire room. His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 thoughts. Mr. Trump, is God real? For a brief moment, everything stopped. Even the man on stage, known for his unshakable confidence and quick responses, hesitated. His sharp blue eyes studied the boy carefully. No one expected this, but what happened next would bring a mother to tears and change the atmosphere in a way no one could have foreseen. The hall was grand, its ceiling high and adorned with brilliant chandeliers. The audience sat in rows of plush seats, their faces illuminated by the glow of cameras and stage lights. The air was charged with energy, anticipation thick as Donald Trump stood behind the podium, his presence commanding the attention of all. Dressed in a dark blue suit with a signature red tie, he leaned slightly forward, his voice steady and powerful. I tell you, America will be great again. We will be stronger, richer, more united. The crowd erupted into applause. Some clapped enthusiastically, others nodded in agreement. Cameras flashed as reporters scribbled notes, documenting every word. As the speech came to an end, Trump adjusted the microphone and looked out over the audience. And now I'll take some questions. Immediately, hands shot up. A man in a tailored suit stood first. Mr. President, what are your plans to further strengthen the economy? A strong question, an expected one. Trump answered confidently, listing his administration's accomplishments and promising greater prosperity. Another hand went up. A journalist. What is your stance on immigration reform moving forward? Again, Trump responded swiftly, speaking about securing the borders and prioritizing American workers. More questions followed, each focused on politics, economy, or security. Each received a strong, assertive reply. Then, in the front row, a small hand slowly rose. It was hesitant, almost uncertain. A young boy, no older than 10, sat beside his mother. His shirt was slightly oversized, his sneakers well-worn but clean. His dark brown eyes held a quiet determination, though his fingers gripped his seat nervously. His mother, a woman with tired but kind eyes, whispered to him, "Jamal, don't disturb him." But the boy had already spoken. His voice was soft but carried through the silent hall. "Mr. Trump, is God real?" A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. The hall, once filled with the murmur of political discussion, fell into complete stillness. Trump blinked. For the first time that evening, he did not immediately answer. His eyes, usually sharp and unwavering, softened just slightly as he looked at the boy. The mother tensed, instinctively reaching for her son's hand as if to pull him back. But before she could, Trump raised a hand, signaling her to stop. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy hesitated before answering. "Jamal, sir." Trump nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He glanced around the room, then back at the child. "Do you believe God is real?" he asked. Jamal lowered his head, his small fingers tightening into fists on his lap. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "I don't know. My mom says God loves everyone, But I don't understand why my dad was beaten and no one helped him. Why we are poor. Why some people don't like me just because of my skin. If God is real, why doesn't he help me? The room, already silent, now held its breath. Eyes turned to Trump, waiting for his response. Even those who had come with skepticism now found themselves drawn in, unable to ignore the raw honesty in the child's words. Trump exhaled slowly. Then he did something no one expected. He stepped away from the podium. Slowly, deliberately, he walked down the steps and moved toward the boy. Each step echoed in the vast hall. Jamal's mother instinctively straightened, her protective instincts flaring. But Trump simply knelt, bringing himself to eye level with the child. When I was a boy, I asked a similar question, he said, his voice quieter now but firm. Jamal blinked, caught off guard. Not because I was poor, Trump continued, but because I didn't know who I was without money, without power. I thought that if I was successful enough, if I was strong enough, I wouldn't need anyone's help, not even God's. Jamal watched him, his small chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Trump looked at him directly, his expression serious. But God doesn't just help us when we ask. He puts us through trials to see how strong we can be. And Jamal, I believe God is listening to you right now. Jamal's fingers twitched on his lap. His lips trembled slightly, though he said nothing. Trump gently rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. You don't have to look to the sky to find him, he said. God is in your mother, who loves you and protects you. God is in the people who refuse to abandon you. And most importantly, God is in you, in your heart, in your courage to ask this question tonight. Jamal's breath hitched. Tears welled in his mother's eyes, silently streaming down her cheeks. A single clap rang out from somewhere in the audience. Then another. And then the entire hall erupted into applause. Jamal looked at his mother, then back at Trump. Slowly, a small, hopeful smile formed on his lips. In that moment, he didn't just find an answer about God. He found something deeper. He found faith in himself. As the thunderous applause began to fade, the hall remained charged with an emotion no one had anticipated. Trump stood up slowly, his gaze lingering on Jamal for a moment longer before turning back toward the stage. The young boy sat frozen, still absorbing what had just happened. His mother wiped her eyes quickly, looking around as if unsure whether she should be embarrassed or proud. The entire room had just witnessed something rare, something raw, something unplanned. Trump ascended the steps and reached the podium once more, adjusting his microphone. The audience waited, their expressions expectant. But before he continued, he cast one more glance toward the boy. He said, looking not just at Jamal but at everyone in the room, we talk about making America great again. We talk about economics, policies, jobs. But what makes this country truly great is not just the numbers. It's people like Jamal, people who still have the courage to ask the hardest questions. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Some nodded thoughtfully, others exchanged glances. Because here's the truth, Trump continued. We all ask that question at some point. Maybe not out loud. Maybe we only ask it when we're alone. But we ask it, is God real? And when things get tough, we wonder, if he is, why isn't he helping me? The air in the room felt heavier, as if every person was now recalling their own struggles, their own doubts. The answer, Trump said, his voice firm, is that he does help. But not always in the way we expect. Sometimes he puts obstacles in front of us to make us stronger. Sometimes he answers us through the people around us. And sometimes He's waiting for us to stop looking for miracles and start becoming them. A second wave of applause erupted. But it was different this time. Less political, more personal. Jamal's mother placed a gentle hand on her son's back. He turned to her, and for the first time in a long time he saw something new in her eyes. Not just love, but pride. After the event ended, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Reporters rushed to file their stories. Supporters shook hands, discussing policies and predictions for the next election. But in the midst of it all, a small figure hesitated near the front row. Jamal stood still, watching as Trump spoke to a few advisors near the stage. His mother placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, baby. It's time to go." But Jamal didn't move. He bit his lip, glancing down at his shoes. "Mama, do you think he really meant it? That God is in me?" His mother smiled softly, tucking a stray curl behind his ear. "I've always known that, Jamal. I just needed you to believe it too." Jamal nodded slowly, then looked up once more toward the stage. And that's when he saw it. Trump had turned away from his advisors, his gaze finding the boy once more. He gestured slightly, a silent invitation. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. He looked up at his mother, eyes wide. "Go on," she whispered. Jamal hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. His small sneakers tapped against the stage floor as he approached the man who had, only minutes ago, given him an answer he never expected. Trump placed his hands on his hips, looking down at the boy with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something softer. "You still have a question, don't you?" Jamal swallowed hard, then nodded. "If God is inside of us," he asked hesitantly, "then why do people still do bad things? Why do they hurt each other?" Trump's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened slightly. "That's a harder question," he admitted, "but I'll tell you what I think." He motioned for Jamal to sit on the edge of the stage beside him. The boy climbed up, his legs dangling off the side as he looked up attentively. "People have choices," Trump said. "God gave us free will. Some people use it to build. Others use it to destroy." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "There are people who will try to tear you down, Jamal. Because of your skin, because of where you come from, because of things you can't control. And you will have two choices. You can let them make you bitter, or you can prove them wrong." Jamal frowned. "How?" Trump smiled faintly. "By being better than them. By working harder. By never letting them take away what's inside you." Jamal was quiet for a long moment, processing the weight of the words. Then he asked something that made Trump pause once more. "Is that what you did?" Trump exhaled, looking out over the now mostly empty hall. His fingers tapped against his knee. "I had to fight for everything," he admitted. "But I'll tell you a secret, Jamal. The strongest people, they aren't the ones who have never been knocked down. They're the ones who got up, even when no one thought they could." Jamal's eyes widened slightly, as if something inside him had clicked into place. "So, I have to get up?" Trump nodded. "Every single time." Jamal's lips pressed together, his small fingers gripping the fabric of his jeans. Then slowly he nodded. "I will." Trump reached out, ruffling the boy's hair. "Good. Because something tells me you're going to be someone important someday." Jamal's mother, standing nearby, pressed a hand to her chest. Her son, her little boy, was walking away from this night with more than just words. He was walking away with something stronger, something unbreakable, hope. And as they stepped away, exiting the grand hall into the cool night air, Jamal looked up at the sky. For the first time, he wasn't searching for an answer. He already knew where to find it. The night had grown colder, but Jamal felt strangely warm as he walked beside his mother down the long steps leading away from the grand hall. His small fingers curled into his palm as he replayed everything in his head. The moment he had spoken, the moment Trump had answered, the moment he had promised himself to always get up. His mother, silent for a long time, finally exhaled. "You okay, baby?" Jamal nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mama, I think I am." She smiled, pulling him into a side hug as they reached the sidewalk. The city lights flickered in the distance. Cars passed by, their headlights briefly illuminating their faces. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," Jamal said after a while, staring at the pavement. "But I think I want to be someone important too." His mother crouched down, cupping his face gently. "You already are, baby. Don't you ever forget that." Jamal swallowed hard, blinking back the emotion rising in his chest. The grand hall behind them was emptying out. Inside, Trump stood near the exit, speaking with a few remaining guests and advisors. He glanced outside, spotting the boy and his mother walking away. For a moment he simply watched. Then, turning to an aide, he murmured something under his breath. "Find out who that kid is. I want to know more about him." The aide nodded, already taking mental notes. Trump stood there a moment longer before stepping outside, inhaling the crisp night air. He had answered 1,000 questions in his lifetime, had been challenged on more issues than he could count. But somehow, the voice of a 10-year-old had asked him something deeper than any journalist, any politician, ever had. He looked up at the sky much like Jamal had. Then, shaking his head with a small smirk, he stepped into his waiting car. Days turned into weeks. The event faded from headlines, buried beneath the next political controversy, the next economic debate, the next urgent issue. But for some, that night lingered. It whispered in the quiet moments. It sat in the back of their minds, waiting to resurface when they needed it most. Jamal, sitting in his small bedroom one evening, stared at an old notebook. The pages were filled with random scribbles. Ideas, dreams, little sketches of things he wanted to do. He picked up a pencil, hesitating for only a second before writing 3 words at the top of a blank page. "Get back." His mother, peeking through the doorway, smiled softly before retreating. Across the country, in a far grander office, Trump sat at his desk, flipping through reports and schedules. But for a brief moment, his mind drifted back to that night, to the boy who had asked him the hardest question of all. He tapped his pen against the desk, then leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Maybe, just maybe, that one question had changed something in him too. This story is more than just a moment in time. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths come from the most unexpected voices. That faith isn't just about believing in something greater, but about believing in yourself. That strength isn't measured by how many times you stand tall, but by how many times you rise after falling. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it sparked something inside you, don't let it stop here. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video. And if you want to hear more stories that challenge, inspire, and uplift, make sure you check out our next video right here on the channel. Because the journey to understanding, to strength, to faith never truly ends. It just begins again every single time we choose to get back up. See you in the next video.